Hello, my dear children. My name is Margaret. Today, I am here to share with you the lessons life has taught me. A long lifetime filled with both sorrow and hope, where every moment carried its own lesson. As the years went by, I came to realize that the deepest wounds often come from those we love and trust the most. And it is from them that we also expect the greatest kindness and compassion. Yet, life has a way of confronting us with harsh truths, standing like a merciless wall before our hopes. My story began the day I crashed into such a wall. And the bitter truth is that the very ones who built that wall were my own child and the little family he had created. Today, I will tell you about the day my son's family refused to take me into their home. The day they turned me away at their door, and how through that painful moment, I learned the greatest lesson of my life. Take a deep breath, my dears, because this story will both warm your hearts and leave them aching.
I had always been a woman who preferred to live on her own, proud of standing on my own 2 feet. I lost my husband at a young age, and I raised my only son, Daniel, with my own hands, through honest work and sacrifice. I never hesitated to give up my youth to make sure he received a good education and could build a home of his own. To me, a child's future was always a mother's greatest legacy. Daniel grew up, got married, and had 2 wonderful children. My grandchildren, Emily and James, were the light of my life. Every moment I spent with them seemed to breathe new life into my aging heart. But over time, living alone in my little house became more difficult. A small leak had started in the roof, and in the winter months, the cold seeped into my bones. I am not one to give up easily, but the weariness of age can weigh heavily on even the strongest shoulders. I had already spent my modest savings on repairs, hoping for a warmer winter, but it wasn't enough. I realized I could no longer manage everything by myself the way I once did. With a heavy heart, I turned to the only person I could truly rely on, my son. My voice trembled when I called him, betraying the years of fatigue and the quiet fear within me. Daniel had always been respectful and attentive, or at least that's what I believed. Surely when he understood how hard it was for me to ask, he would not hesitate to extend a helping hand. When I told him about the problems with the house, he was understanding at first. "Don't worry, Mom, we'll figure something out," he said. His words eased me, if only for a moment. At that time, my faith in him was unshakable. I thought to myself, just as I once supported him, now he will be there for me. It felt less like a simple mother-son bond and more like a silent pact between 2 souls who had faced life's hardships together. But life had more lessons to teach me, and they would prove how fragile that faith could be. A few days after our call, Daniel phoned again. He suggested that the best solution would be for me to stay with him and his family while the repairs were done. The idea filled me with joy. It wasn't only about having a roof over my head. It was about feeling that I still belonged, that I wasn't a burden, but rather a cherished part of their lives. My happiness lasted only until the day my daughter-in-law rang me. Her voice was polite but distant. She said, "Mother, I hope you won't feel uncomfortable. I wouldn't want your routine to be disrupted." Though her words sounded harmless, beneath them I sensed a deep reluctance. A quiet unease settled in me. I began to feel like an unwelcome guest, tolerated, but not truly wanted. Still, I tried to silence those dark thoughts, telling myself I was only imagining things. In the days before Daniel came to collect me, I convinced myself that Sophie had only been worried about my comfort. I promised myself that I would not be a burden. I would help with the household, look after the children, and put warm soup on the table when they returned weary from work. For that is a mother's place, to nurture their family, to bring warmth into their home. When Daniel's car finally pulled up outside my house, my heart fluttered as I picked up my small suitcase. But the moment I saw only him step out, his stiff smile, his averted eyes, the heaviness in his shoulders as if he bore a weight too great to carry, my joy turned to ice-cold fear. In that instant, I knew what awaited me was not the warmth of a family home, but a cold reception full of unspoken storms. The silence in the car was unbearable, louder than any shout I had ever heard. When I asked about my grandchildren, Daniel's brief, distracted answers and the way he kept his eyes fixed on the road tightened the knot in my throat. Sitting in my own son's car, feeling like a stranger, was a wound deeper than words could express. Those stolen glances, that suffocating atmosphere, they were the first blade that pierced my aging heart.
When we arrived at my son's house, the sight of that two-story building, every brick seemingly laid with wealth, made me feel so small and out of place. Compared with my own little home, filled with memories in every corner, this place felt like a soulless palace where only echoes lived instead of laughter. In that moment, I understood it is not the height of the walls that makes a house a home, but the closeness of the hearts within it. The moment Sophie opened the door and greeted me with that smile which never once reached her eyes, a mask more than a welcome, seemed to last an eternity. Her folded arms built an invisible wall between us, and the cold politeness in her gaze shouted a silent sentence my soul could hear all too clearly. "You are not wanted here." With a sweet-sounding voice that carried poison underneath, she rattled off excuses, how small the house was, how the children's rooms barely fit them, how the noise might disturb me at my age, and how it would really be more sensible to book me into a nearby guest house for my comfort. Each word was like a shard of glass piercing my heart, a polite but unmistakable declaration that I was not welcome even for a single day. But the deepest blow came not from her words, but from my son's silence. As Sophie spoke, Daniel stood there with his head bowed, saying nothing, making no attempt to defend me. His silence cut far deeper than her 1,000 words, for it was proof that he had chosen his wife's side over his mother's. There in the cold hallway, with my little suitcase at my feet, I realized what it truly means to watch the mountain you have leaned upon crumble before your eyes. That day, not only the door of their house, but also the door of my unshakable trust and my dream of belonging to a family closed forever. This was the bitterest lesson of my life, taught to me by the ice-cold walls built by my own flesh and blood. I said nothing. I did not let a single tear fall. My dignity was stronger than the blow I had just received. I knew that turning back to look at that door would show them my weakness. So I walked away slowly and steadily, as though it was not my feet moving, but my soul moving forward. With that silent farewell, I closed a chapter of my life forever. With every step I took, Daniel's silent face and Sophie's cold and triumphant eyes replayed in my mind like a film reel. Around me, the world's noise became a meaningless hum. I was buried under such a great collapse inside myself that the laughter of children and the honking of cars simply bounced off the walls of the bottomless pit of loneliness I had fallen into. When I sank on a wooden bench in the park and saw across from me a mother looking lovingly at her child, the weight of all my sacrifices, sleepless nights, and the sacred joy of raising a child struck me as empty. My heart felt like a sponge squeezed dry of its joy. In that moment, I understood. No matter how much you give, the other person can only receive as much as their conscience allows. A single tear slipped from my eye, taking with it all my sorrow, disappointment, and helplessness. When it dried, I felt a new shoot sprouting within my soul. I no longer needed Daniel's love or Sophie's mercy, because life had taught me, in the harshest way, that a person's only unshakable fortress in this world is themselves. From that hour on, as Margaret, the woman I truly am, I would find the strength to rise from the rubble of my fallen walls on my own. I did not know where I would go or what tomorrow would bring, but I was sure of one thing. I would not return to my old leaking house as a defeated woman. Until I rebuilt my life with my own hands, I would find a safe harbor on my own feet. That night, a modest hotel room was more precious to me than any 5-star palace, because that room was the first step of my rebirth, my freedom, and my new life in which I would owe nothing to anyone. When I stepped through the doors of that modest hotel, the sense of anonymity among all those unfamiliar faces, where neither my name nor my story was known, seemed to lift the heavy burden from my shoulders. For the first time in my life, I was not someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's mother, or an unwanted mother-in-law. I was simply Margaret, taking a step for myself, with no explanation owed to anyone. It was a bittersweet but profoundly liberating taste of freedom. Closing the door of the room behind me, I was enveloped by a silence untouched by memories or reproach. The plain white walls, the clean bed, and the simple furnishings felt like a sanctuary, offering the mental clarity I had long yearned for. This room, free from the ghosts of the past and the worries of the future, was a sacred pause where I could listen to my own breath and calmly plan how to rebuild the rest of my life. As I sat on the edge of the bed and closed my eyes in that deep quiet, it felt as though I had shed every title and every role at once. I was no longer a mother wounded by her son's ingratitude, nor a mother-in-law suffering her daughter-in-law's cruelty. I was simply a tired woman who had been left alone in life, who now understood she must walk the road ahead on her own, and who accepted that truth in its stark reality. Looking out of the window at the millions of lights of the city that never sleeps, I thought of all the joys, sorrows, and struggles hidden behind each illuminated window, some like mine, some utterly different. I realized how small my own pain was in the vastness of the universe. That understanding did not belittle my suffering. It gave me a new perspective, helping me to see it not as a personal catastrophe, but as an inevitable part of life. It was then, in that tiny hotel room, that the first concrete plan for my future began to take shape in my mind. I understood that I could not live clinging to the past. My only way forward was to free myself entirely, to sell the leaking house that would poison me daily with its memories, to leave the city where I had been declared unwanted, and to build a new life somewhere no one would find me. That decision would be the first signature in a new chapter of my life. When I woke up the next morning to the weak sunlight streaming through the window, the heavy grief of the night before had been replaced by a steel-hard determination. I realized I had no more time to spend weeping or complaining. Faced with life's blow, I would either remain buried under the rubble or build a new fortress from its stones. As I walked through the streets of the neighborhood where I had spent my years, I looked at the shops of my childhood and the corners where I had chatted with neighbors, as though they were faded photos in an album that no longer belonged to me. The night before had not only severed my family ties, it had also ripped out the invisible roots that bound me to this city, turning me into an exile in my own homeland. Pausing with the key in my hand before the old wooden door of my house, the door my husband had bought with his first wage, the hallway where Daniel had taken his first steps, the rooms once ringing with my grandchildren's laughter, my heart ached for a moment, but I refused to let that feeling become a weakness. I reminded myself that this was no longer a warm home, but an asset I needed to sell to claim my future. Inside, the familiar smell, The silent furniture and the lived-in walls tried to draw me back into the sweet but now toxic arms of the past. I refused to be a prisoner of those memories. Instead, I looked at each chair and each table with an estate agent's eye, seeing not their sentimental value, but their market price. This was not an emotional farewell, but a necessary transaction to save my life. And in that moment, without hesitation, I lifted down from the wall my favorite photograph, the one of Daniel and me years ago in a happy moment. I knew this act was more than removing a picture. It was the declaration that my unreturned motherly love for my faithless son had to be set aside at last. Turning the frame face down on the table, I laid the first stone of my new life. The very first thing I did was pick up my old address book and look for the number of an estate agent who had no emotional ties to this neighborhood or my past. Someone who would handle the sale purely professionally. I didn't want this process watered down by neighborly favors or interrupted even for a moment by questions like, "Why are you selling, Mrs. Margaret?" This was my decision, and it had to be as sharp and clear as a surgeon's scalpel. Each press of the phone buttons felt like a hammer blow to my past. As I held the cold receiver to my ear, I knew this call was a crossroads from which there would be no return. With it, I was putting up for sale not only a house, but all the memories stored within its walls, and most painfully, the last shred of hope that one day my son might regret everything and walk back through that door. While explaining the situation to the unfamiliar voice on the other end, I noticed how calm and steady my own voice was. Even I was surprised. It was as if I had been waiting for this moment for years. Without hesitation, almost like an experienced trader, I listed the property's features, its location, and my wish for a swift sale. In that moment, I understood. When a person rises from the rubble, they go on with a tougher, unbreakable shell. When I replaced the receiver and heard the click, the deep silence of the house seemed to settle over me for an instant. My heart tightened briefly under the enormity of what I had just done. I was now officially a guest in this home, an old tree waiting to be uprooted from the soil where it had grown. Yet the feeling was not regressed. It was a bittersweet freedom, carrying the hope of being planted somewhere new. Looking out at my little garden, for the first time a vision of the future appeared in my mind. Perhaps on the south coast, near the sea, in a small whitewashed house where I could grow my own geraniums and wake to the smell of salt in the air, somewhere no one knew me. I could live the rest of my life quietly and only for myself. That thought was the strongest branch of hope sprouting inside me, the one that would keep me standing. As I waited for the estate agent to arrive, I tried to see the house through a stranger's eyes. I removed the personal photographs from the walls, the handmade cloths from the coffee table, everything that spoke of me. This house was no longer my home. It was a property to be presented at its best, and not a single scrap of my feelings or memories would be allowed into the bargaining. When I opened the door and saw the man standing there,
a face I had never seen before, carrying the expression of a professional there to do his job. I sensed that his presence meant something entirely different from all the guests I had welcomed before. He was not there to smell the memories clinging to my walls, but to check the state of the paint, not to admire the view from my window, but to note how much sunlight the rooms received. He was there to see the body, not the soul. As I walked him from room to room, hearing him call the room where my son had grown up a convenient bedroom, and my late husband's beloved balcony an area that could be enclosed and developed, I felt acutely how the sacred spaces of an entire lifetime could, in a stranger's mouth, be reduced to ordinary property terms. It was like revealing your deepest secrets to someone you had never met, painful and in a strange way liberating. When all the inspections were over and we sat at the kitchen table and he named a figure, what I heard was not just the value of an old house, it was the price of my dream of that small whitewashed home by the sea, my proof that I could live in peace without depending on anyone, and above all, the tangible evidence that I could stand on my own 2 feet. In that moment, I realized that everything I had lost in the past had actually been the cost of the freedom I was about to gain. When the man left, briefcase in hand and a few papers signed, and I stood alone holding the cold banner with the red letters, "For Sale," I felt to the very core of my being that I had stepped onto a path of no return. That sign did not only announce that my house was for sale, it was my manifesto of independence, declaring to the world that Margaret's old life was being cleared away, and from the ashes of disappointment and betrayal, a brand new beginning was being born.
The simple sheet of canvas in my hands felt like one of the heaviest burdens I had ever carried. That single word printed on it was not just an advertisement for 4 walls, but a cold notice declaring that a lifetime of memories, a mother's sacrifices, and all my past in this neighborhood now had a market value and would soon be irreversibly given up. As I tied the banner to the balcony railings with my own hands, each knot felt like cutting through the invisible chains that had bound me to my past and to the need for a faithless son's love. This was not a fit of rage, nor an act of despair. It was a quiet, deliberate farewell, a dignified ceremony I conducted for myself, declaring to the world that I would build my future with my own hands. When I caught the surprised, curious, slightly judgmental eyes of my neighbor, Mrs. Harris, from her window, I felt not the slightest need to explain myself. With a short but meaningful nod, I announced to her, and through her to the entire street, that I would no longer live my life as fodder for gossip, but as a woman who stood firmly behind her every step, needing no one's approval. Inside, with a cup of tea in my hand, I knew the phones would soon ring, the neighbors would whisper at their doors, questions would fly. What happened to Mrs. Margaret? Did she quarrel with her son? Has she run out of money? But none of it touched my soul anymore. I had already sailed through the storm and chosen to build my own harbor, one no outside noise would ever reach. And I knew the smoke of this fire would drift to the very place it was meant to, the nose of the son who had turned me away. Sure enough, when my phone rang shrilly and his name flashed on the screen, I was not surprised.
But this time it would not be the soft-hearted mother desperate for her son's voice who picked up. It would be the new Margaret, firm, self-possessed, ready to answer any question, and no longer willing to swallow any lies. As I raised the receiver to my ear, there was no sting in my heart, no trace of anger. I was no longer a discarded, helpless mother. I was a woman who had taken the most important decision of her life on her own, and who now stood ready to face its consequences with steel-like resolve. This call would be the first test of my new life. Hearing Daniel's panicked, angry words, "Mum, what is the meaning of this? I'm humiliated. Everyone's calling me. Take that sign down at once." I understood with painful clarity that his concern was not for where I would live or how I would cope. His only worry was his own comfort and reputation. Once again, the truth whispered to my heart. He felt for himself, not for me. When his furious tirade ended and it was my turn, I heard my own voice, steady and unshaking, say, "I am selling my house, Daniel. This is my decision, and it is none of your business." That calm, clear reply, cutting through the last emotional bond he thought he could wield over me, turned his anger into stunned helplessness. As I expected, when his rage failed, he shifted to panic. "Where will you go? What will you do with the money? That house is my right too." In those selfish questions, I received the final and bitterest confirmation. In his eyes, I had never been more than a caretaker of an inheritance he believed would one day be his. I gave him no more ground. "That's my concern now, Daniel. Take care of yourself," I said, and hung up. In that instant, I felt the crushing hump of disappointment and betrayal slide off my back forever. The deep silence that spread through the house was no longer loneliness. It was the first melody of my new, free life, a life where I would answer to no one but myself. The morning after that phone call, I awoke to find that the deep silence in the house no longer felt like suffocating loneliness. Instead, it had become a peaceful melody that let me hear my own thoughts. By hanging up the phone the night before, I had silenced not only the voice of a faithless son, but also the noise of years of expectations, disappointments, and futile struggles. When I opened the memory chest I hadn't touched in years and held my son's first baby cardigan in my hands, I felt not the sharp pang I had grown accustomed to, but something entirely different, like the distant respect a visitor feels when looking at artifacts in a museum. These objects were no longer part of my living memories. They were relics from a chapter now closed, to be remembered with both love and sorrow. That day, I divided the house, and a lifetime, into 3 parts. What was valuable enough to take with me, what was useful enough to give to others, and what was too heavy a burden to keep. This simple sorting was in truth a reflection of the great cleansing happening in my soul, teaching me which memories were worth preserving and which resentments deserved to be tied up like rubbish and thrown away. As I sifted through my belongings, I realized the fierce fire of anger inside me had burned itself out, leaving in its place a weary but wise calm. I understood that clinging to anger was nothing more than giving someone free lodging inside your heart, and I had become free enough not to give a single corner of my mind to those who no longer belong there. That evening, as I ate my supper alone at a modest table, I felt for the first time in years the incredible lightness of being free from drama, expectations, and conflict. It was neither victory nor defeat. It was simply returning to life in its purest form, the quiet but magnificent joy of being enough for oneself. And that joy was more precious, more real than even my dream of a whitewashed house by the sea. When Mr. Collins, the estate agent, called to say the first buyers would arrive within half an hour, I felt no panic, no excitement. I was no longer the owner of this house, only its caretaker until the sale was complete. The strangers soon to walk through the door were not intruding into my private world. They were only viewing a property that would soon belong to someone else. Opening the door to a young couple and their innocent child, I saw in their eyes the sparkle of hope. For a moment, I was carried back to the day my husband and I had first stepped into this house years ago. But the feeling was only fleeting nostalgia, for I knew they weren't here to buy my past. They were here to build their own future. By opening the door to them, I wasn't just offering a house. I was giving them the chance to begin their dreams. As they wandered through rooms full of my memories, speaking of knocking down a kitchen wall or turning Daniel's old room into a space for their child, I felt not the slightest sting. On the contrary, the thought that these walls and rooms, no longer meaningful to me, would soon serve a new family's happiness, their laughter, and their future, filled me with an unexpected serenity. And then, in that brief moment when the little child looked up at me with curious eyes and offered an innocent smile, I was reminded once again of life's simplest law. Life always flows forward, and all that grows old will eventually give way to the new. My role in this house was complete, and its walls were now waiting to echo with the laughter of this child and the generations to come. When they left, the silence that settled in the house did not carry the sorrow of farewell, but the quiet satisfaction of a task fulfilled. That day, I understood that selling a house is not merely parting with bricks and mortar. It is setting memories free, saying goodbye to the past, and making room for new beginnings, both for oneself and for others. And on that day, I managed to achieve that farewell in the most graceful way.
During the days after that first visit, as I gradually emptied the house, I felt my soul being cleared out too. dusty shelves of unnecessary memories and old resentments coming down one by one. This was not an escape or surrender. It was the quiet preparation of a spirit ready to stretch its wings beyond the narrow space life had given it and into a vast new horizon. When I saw the estate agent's name flash on my phone, there was not the slightest flicker of curiosity or anxiety in me. I had already found the inner strength to meet whatever came. And when Mr. Collins told me that the young family had offered almost exactly the price I'd asked for, I realized this was not just a property sale. It was destiny's way of approving my brave decision, a green light for my new life. When he paused, perhaps expecting me to haggle, I didn't hesitate. With no tremor in my voice, I said, "I accept their offer, Mr. Collins. You can start the paperwork." For me, the important thing wasn't a few extra pounds, but freeing myself from the chains of the past as quickly as possible, stepping into the peaceful future I had dreamed of, a peace no amount of money could buy. The moment I hung up and truly understood the house was sold, it felt as though an invisible weight I had carried for years had lifted, and I was suddenly light enough to defy gravity. This was more than selling a house. It was leaving behind a painful past, a faithless son, a life full of disappointment. In short, it was the indescribable freedom of becoming my own hero. That evening, as I poured myself a glass of the sour cherry liqueur I had made years ago, I didn't raise it to the pains of the past or to those who had hurt me. I raised it to the new Margaret, to her courage, her determination, and to the peaceful, self-reliant days ahead. Because the greatest celebration isn't when others leave. It's when you discover you are enough for yourself. On that final morning, waking among the empty walls of a house that was no longer mine, the echoing silence didn't whisper the sorrow of an ending, but the thrilling emptiness of a life about to begin. Around me, each box held not only belongings, but also disappointments and hurts, packing them away so that I could travel light into my long journey ahead. When the moving truck appeared at the end of the narrow street and the workers began carrying out the objects of my life one by one, I watched like a spectator at a film set being dismantled. I understood then that we are all only travelers in this world, and that the places we call home are merely stops where we hang our memories for a while until the next traveler comes. Just as I thought everything was done, I saw Daniel get out of his car in a flurry of panic, staring at the scene as though waking from a nightmare. But inside me, there rose neither anger nor pity, only a distant calm as I watched a man face the rubble of a life he had torn down with his own hands. When he came up to me and asked the meaningless, too late question, "Are you really leaving?" I could see with absolute clarity that his last-minute struggle didn't come from love. It came from the selfish fear of being abandoned, of losing control, and perhaps most of all, from realizing he no longer had a safe harbor to lean on. That truth confirmed once again how right my decision was. Instead of answering him, I simply watched the doors of the moving truck close on my belongings. Then,
As I walked towards the taxi that would carry me into my new life, I turned once to the shocked, helpless man behind me and said only, "Goodbye, my son." It was not forgiveness nor reproach. It was the final farewell of someone who had stepped out of a supporting role in another's story and into the leading role of her own.
From the back window of the taxi, as the silhouette of the neighborhood I had left behind and of my son standing alone on the pavement melted away like mist behind the Rain Street glass, I felt no regret and no sorrow. I knew only that I had closed the final page of a book to which I had given my entire life, and was now turning to the first page of a brand new, spotless notebook, one that would bear only my name on its cover. When I paused for a moment amidst the human tide and endless hum of the bus terminal, the anonymity of being in a place where no one knew my name or my story gave me a freedom I had not felt in years. I was no longer the mother of a faithless son, nor Mrs. Margaret under the curious eyes of gossiping neighbors. I was simply one traveler among many, carrying a suitcase and heading towards a new life. Standing at the counter when I saw the name of the seaside town I had dreamed of on the glowing sign, and heard the words "one way" leave my lips without hesitation, I understood that I was not just buying a ticket. I was cutting the last ties to my past, signing a vow to myself not only to leave, but never to return. As the heavy wheels of the bus began to turn and the lights of the city that had imprisoned me for so many years fell away one by one, it was as if the chains wrapped around my soul were loosening link by link. With every mile I grew lighter, freer. This was not simply an escape from a city, it was an escape from the fate, the helplessness, the role of the victim that had been forced upon me. In the darkness of the night, gliding alone along that endless road into the future, I realized how simple life really was. Sometimes reaching happiness is not about adding anything new, but about having the courage to leave behind everything that weighs you down. And that night, though I had left a lifetime's ruins in my wake, for the first time I was certain I was moving in the right direction, towards the dawn where the sun would rise. When the darkest hour of the navy blue night finally gave way to the first shy light of dawn spilling across the sea, orange and pink strokes painting the sky like an artist's palette, I knew I was witnessing not only the birth of a new day, but the rebirth of my own life, washing the dark past clean with colors of hope. Stepping off the bus and breathing in that first lungful of air, it was more than just fresh air. It carried the salt of the sea, the resin of the pines, the sweetness of bougainvillea. It swept away in a single breath the stale, rusted air that had clung to my soul for years, bringing me back to life. And when, for the first time in years, I was met not with the suspicious, judging glances of a great city, but with the warm, sunlit smile of a stranger, an old taxi driver whose simple words, "Welcome, love, I'll take you to the best place," carried more kindness than I had ever felt in my son's cold house, I knew again that I had come to the right place. As the taxi wound its way through cobbled streets, past whitewashed houses with geraniums in their windows and cascades of purple and pink bougainvillea, it was as though my daydreams had stepped out of imagination and into reality. And when the car stopped in front of a small 2-story guest house, I felt I had found not just a place to stay, but the peaceful home where my spirit belonged, where my wounds would heal, and where I would bloom again. With the warm sand under my feet and the gentle sound of waves whispering at my ear, I understood that all the pain I had endured, every tear I had shed, had not been in vain. They had been the steps that carried me to this place, to this moment, and there by the sea, I laid down the weight of my past into the waves and found all the hope of my future in the rising sun. On that Aegean morning, waking not under the weight of expectation or duty, but to the sound of waves and the cries of gulls, I tasted for the first time the priceless luxury of owning my own time. Every minute of the day was mine to spend as I pleased, without answering to anyone. That was a wealth no money could buy. As I wandered through the fragrant market, past stalls piled with fresh tomatoes, clusters of grapes, and bundles of healing herbs, I was not merely shopping. I was touching once again the generosity of the earth, this simple, unpretentious, yet deeply nourishing rhythm of real life. This plain beauty whispered to me how close at hand true happiness really is. Tasting a handful of olives offered freely by an old olive seller, chatting with him about nothing and everything, as if we'd been neighbors for 40 years, I remembered how simple and genuine human connections can be. Love and respect, I realized, are not locked inside the tangled equations of blood ties, but in the simple, unasked for kindness of one stranger handing another a handful of olives. When I stepped into the little estate agency on the seafront, there was no weight of necessity or desperation on my shoulders. In my hands was my own money, in my heart my own bream, and on my lips my own terms. I had come not as a supplicant, but as a woman with both feet firmly on the ground, choosing the peaceful home where she would live the rest of her life. That evening, as the setting sun left its crimson shimmer across the sea, I made a promise to myself, in the life ahead, I would not spend a single second on anything that did not nourish my soul. I would owe no one forgiveness who had hurt me, and each new day would begin, like the sea itself, with me listening only to my own inner tides. This would be the one constitution of my new life, written by me and never to be broken. Sitting opposite the kindly woman in the agency, describing the home I sought, I spoke not of square footage or number of rooms, but of the peace my soul was searching for, the sunlight I wanted to spill through my windows in the mornings, and the fertile soil I longed to touch with my own hands. I knew that what makes a person happy is not the width of the walls, but the space the spirit feels inside them. The first few houses we viewed, though beautiful and practical, did not speak to my soul. They gave me none of that "this is it" feeling I was waiting for. So I listened to my heart and refused to squeeze myself into a place that would feel too small for my spirit, no matter how quickly I could move in. Life had taught me painfully that the biggest mistake is trying to call home a place that is not truly yours. At the end of a narrow stone lane, when I saw the small stone house
cloaked in the shadow of an old bougainvillea and its sky-blue door, it felt as though I had found a missing piece of myself. This was not merely a building. It was the resting place my tired soul had been seeking, my dream made flesh. Before I even crossed the threshold, I knew I had come home. As soon as I stepped inside, the generous sunlight streaming through the windows and the scent of thyme drifting from the garden wrapped themselves around me. In the echo of my own footsteps through the empty rooms, I could already hear future laughter, see the steam rising from afternoon tea, and feel the quiet moments spent reading by the window. This was not an empty house. It was a full life waiting to be lived by me. Standing at the garden gate, closing my eyes to the sweet sea breeze on my face, I knew my search was over. Without a single word, only with a grateful smile, I turned to the good-hearted woman behind me and said, "This is the one." In that moment, I was not just choosing a house, I was signing the title deed to the sanctuary where I would spend the rest of my life, this small paradise I had earned with my own hands.
When I watched the few carefully chosen belongings of mine carried through the bright doorway of my new house, I realized it wasn't just furniture that had entered. It was also the handful of memories worth keeping, the rare, beautiful moments from my past carried into this new life. It was the embrace of past and future, the reconciliation of old and new, and the most meaningful, most complete moment of my story. Before arranging anything, I brewed myself a fragrant cup of Turkish coffee, and with that first sip, the familiar taste and aroma breathed an instant warmth of home into those unfamiliar walls. It was more than coffee. It was a quiet declaration that this house and this life were now fully in my hands to shape with my own peace and my own joy. When I sank my hands into the fertile Aegean soil, pulling out the weeds and planting tomatoes and geraniums, it felt as though I was clearing not only my garden, but also the last roots of bitterness from my soul. Each seedling I planted was a seed of hope for the future, and I knew this land would answer my care with flowers and fruits in generous return. Just then, when my neighbor appeared with a plate of homemade biscuits, carrying the warmth of a mother's kindness, I remembered what I had forgotten in the great city, the treasure of true neighborliness, of kindness without calculation, of a simple and sincere welcome. Sometimes it is not blood ties that bind us most strongly, but the invisible bond baked into a plate of biscuits offered by a stranger. That first evening, sitting in my own chair, gazing from my own window, I watched the setting sun paint the sky in magnificent colors and understood the greatest lesson life had taught me in the hardest way, that a person's true home is not in walls or in other people, but in the inner peace they build with their own hands. And that evening, after a long and stormy journey, I finally knew I had come home. Now, looking out at the sea from this peaceful house, when I think back on the painful days I endured, I find no resentment, no anger in my heart. Instead, I feel a strange gratitude, even to the faithlessness that forced me to climb out of the abyss to discover my own wings and to become the wise and free woman I am today. For sometimes the greatest gifts arrive wrapped in the cruelest packages.
If you ask whether I have forgiven my son, my answer would be neither yes nor no. I have reached a place beyond forgiveness or hatred, the calm harbor of indifference. I see him and his family as strangers who have walked out of my life, and I wish them well from afar. But the precious space within my soul is now reserved for peace alone. This long journey has taught me that a person's true home is not the house where they were born, not the shelter of a child's side, nor the embrace of a spouse. A person's only unshakable fortress is the inner peace they build through their own courage, their own honor, and their own choices, free from dependence on anyone's love or mercy. And once you find that peace, wherever you are in the world, you have truly arrived home. So, my dear children, this is the lesson of my life. Never love anyone more than you love yourself, and never linger even a moment where your love is treated as a burden or taken for granted. For if you do not value yourself, no one else will. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to leave everything behind and set out alone on a new path. Remember always, even the darkest night ends with the sunrise, and you must never fear to carve out your own road, for at the end of that road there will always be a sun shining only for you, warm enough to light your way and strong enough to ensure you never feel cold again. Stay well and stay with love.